Hi, everybody. So we are live. We are getting back to doing my series that I had started with my friend AJ called His Pick, Her Pick, where we pick a genre and each of us picks a movie that from that genre that we haven't seen, that the other hasn't seen. Then we watch both films and then we talk about them. And I have a new co-host this time, Richard, who has joined me for the Harry Potter podcast, is joining me for this series now, and we're gonna have a lot of fun. We're gonna talk about particularly haunted house. We picked horror genre this time, but we both ended up picking haunted house movies. We're going to talk about the others and the haunting. And so, Richard, you want to say hi?
Hello.
And this is going to be a lot of fun. You know, it's interesting because we didn't pick we just both randomly kind of picked these films, but they really do have quite a bit in common.
I remember because you first mentioned the others on your video about atmosphere in films, and that was when I brought up The Haunting.
Yeah. I haven't seen all that many scary movies, but I had not seen The Haunting, and so it was really fun. I think both these movies are really good, and they don't. They're both kind of. I would say none of them use cheap gimmicks. Like they're both kind of. They expect you to kind of have to work for it a little bit with the story, I think. If that makes sense. I guess there is a twist in the others, but I don't know. I just feel like both of them are smart.
Yeah. I felt like there wasn't much in the way of jump scares either. I think there was like one in The Haunting and maybe two in the others.
Yeah.
That's what we expect from horror these days, jump scares.
Yeah. Yeah, they just didn't feel like and like the characters are interesting. Where a lot of horror movies, you're just like, oh my gosh, what is she doing? Why is she going in that room? Why is she, that kind of thing. Like, why are they? There's a ad here for Geico, where they show these teenagers, and there's this guy with the chainsaw or whatever, and they're like, I think we should go back in the house, all the stuff, and they're like, horror kids. Teenagers in horror movies, it's what they do,
Yeah. Have you seen Chris Stuckman's video on the trouble with horror movies today?
I think I saw it a while ago. Yeah, but I haven't seen it for a while. So you could make that point about that?
Well, it wasn't necessarily about that. He was just talking about how there's not much effort put into horror movies because you can have a very low budget, and they're going to make that budget back many times over, so they can just churn out sequels and everything, no matter how good or bad they are.
Yeah.
That's why you get a lot of schlock with horror movies these days.
Yeah, because they only have to make really very little opening weekend and their success. So, who cares? Although evidently this year has been a really good year for horror movies. I haven't seen most of the big name movies, but I did really like 10 Cloverfield Lane, which I guess is more a thriller, but that I really thought was good.
Yeah. No, I don't tend to watch movies at the cinema. I will sometimes watch them like on Netflix or like on TV, but I'm not generally a horror movie fan, except when it's vampires. I like vampire horror.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
What's your favorite vampire movie?
Bram Stoker's Dracula, the one with Gary Oldman. Okay,
I've heard of that one. I've read the book, but I haven't seen the movie.
Yeah, it's not it is kind of sort of faithful to the book, but it does make a lot of deviations as well. Even though it's the only one called Bram Stoker's Dracula. Yeah. There's also this 1924 film called Nosferatu, which is a silent film.
And I've heard of that. Well. That's good.
Yeah, and it's a silent film, so it's not too graphic either. Bram Stoker's Dracula is very graphic.
Yeah.
In more ways than one.
Right. That's what I heard. That's probably why I was nervous about it, but I heard it is a good movie.
Yeah.
Okay. I do have the chat room if anybody ends up joining us. I have the chat room open. And so let's talk first about The Haunting. Let's do the older one first. So this movie was made in 1960 or was released in 1963. Director Robert Weiss, and who was a really interesting director. He had he kind of did a little bit of everything with his career. He did West Side Story, Sound of Music, and then he also did the first Star Trek movie. So, and then The Haunting. So it's interesting. And yeah, it stars. It's based on the book The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. Yeah. And stars Julie Harris, Claire Bloom, Richard Johnson, and Russ Tamblyn. So.
Yeah, I read a little bit about it. Apparently, the screenwriter had read the book, and he and even though the book is quite I haven't read the book, but apparently it is quite clear that there is supernatural things going on. But he felt it was more like psychological horror in the mind of Eleanor, and so that was the approach that he chose to take in the film adaptation.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. Also, apparently, the actress who played Eleanor was actually suffering from depression at the time of making the film, and she kind of carried that over into the character.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, she was a really interesting actress in the role. I thought. I know she just was. She was very plain. I thought in a certain way that made her interesting, and I don't know, there was just something about her that seemed like a normal person, not a celebrity, like kind of a like you get now with like, I don't know, I could picture them casting like, I don't know, someone like Jennifer Aniston or something like that.
Yeah.
In this part.
Yeah, I don't know who played Eleanor in the remake, but the remake had like Catherine Zeta-Jones and Owen Wilson and Liam Neeson in it, didn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I heard that's horrible. I haven't seen it, but I heard
I've only seen the Nostalgia Critic review of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is a shame. And I was reading about. Well, never mind. We'll talk about that in a second. But you want to tell us a little bit about kind of what it's about?
Hey. Okay, we're not worried about spoilers, I presume.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We're gonna be talking spoilers.
Okay.
Especially in the others.
Okay. Well, basically, the film is set around Hill House, which is based in New England, and it starts off with this description of the backstory, where lots of people associated with the house died, and one went mad and killed herself, and it all starts because Dr. Markway, who is an anthropologist who is interested in supernatural phenomena, wants to conduct a study of the house, and so he brings in a few people to who have been associated with phenomena like this to study it, and one of them is Eleanor, who is quite a troubled young woman. She's spent 11 years of her life looking after her invalid mother, and this is the first proper vacation that she's had, as she says, and she really wants something new to happen in her life, and also I think she says at one point she wants to be cherished. And so they turn up at his house. It's about 4 people, and and as they stay there over the next few days, there's lots of strange noises and funny goings on. And Dr. Markway's wife turns up and then disappears, and Eleanor becomes increasingly unstable and becomes convinced that she's actually meant to stay with the house, that the house wants her. And so by the end of the film, Dr. Markway tries to force her to leave, and she starts driving away, and then she's startled by Mrs. Markway suddenly running out into the road, and she crashes into a tree, and then she dies, and apparently that's given the house what it wants.
Yeah. And it's all women that had all died in the house, right?
Yeah, because the only man there was Hugh Crane, who built it. He said he went to England and died in a drowning accident.
Yeah. And the let's see, Dr. Markway is there to kind of to sort of disprove the haunted house kind of myth, right?
I don't think so. I think he's more like he actively believes in supernatural phenomena, or rather, he would like to find explanations for it.
Oh, okay.
He will be interested in like finding like proof of an afterlife or something like that. And I think that's one of the good things about this film. The only real skeptic character is Luke, the guy who's going to inherit the house, and even he's not really a grump about his skepticism. Whereas whereas like Dr. Mark Wayne and Theo, the other woman who's there, they're more like interested in the supernatural phenomenon and kind of assuming that it is real.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, that's true. Uh, so do you want to start with your questions?
Okay. So my first question was, what did you think of how the horror in the film itself was handled, and did the ambiguity and the hidden nature of the supernatural work for you?
I think it did. I think it was one that I could manage rewatching a lot of times, where a lot of horror movies, I feel like for instance, a Shyamalan movie, where in his movie, the line between horror and thriller is very fuzzy, but his movies for me are one-time watches at best. Most of them are terrible, but once you get sort of the twist, I have no interest in watching the movie anymore. Whereas this, I feel like you could watch this a lot of times and learn something different about the characters each time, learn something different kind of about what's going on in the scene, in the scenes. So I think it handled it very well.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of uncertainty in it. I mean,
Mm.
certainly you never actually see the ghosts. The ghosts are definitely there because so many people notice them. Um, but a lot of these scares come from what you're not seeing, like the pounding outside the door,
Yeah,
or and
sounds. It
the
comes from
yes,
noise.
noise, yeah, and the knob turning thing, and it builds up a lot of tension, I think, because you don't actually see it.
Hmm.
Mm. And
It's
also, you don't really
true.
know and you don't really know the nature of the ghost either. Like you don't know if it's they're specific people. So like not like in a lot of horror films, you like a specific person who died in this site, or maybe it's built on an ancient Indian burial ground or something like that. But this house, you really don't know. I mean, Dr. Markway says at the beginning it was born bad. There's just like some kind of evil inherent in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. And it's amazing because something like this should feel really cheesy because it's been copied a lot,
Yeah.
but I don't think it does. I don't know, there's just something about it that felt sort of refreshing.
Yeah. That's what I thought. Yeah.
With the dialogue, I thought the dialogue was really good.
Oh, the dialogue was brilliant, definitely.
Yeah.
The conversations that the characters had about
Yes.
various things. Yeah. And also
I
some of the horror is kind of ambiguous, isn't it? Because you know that Eleanor is going a little bit crazy, certainly towards the end, and so you think that some of it might be happening in her head. Like I think the second time she hears the noises outside the inside the room in the scene where she thinks somebody is holding her hand,
mhm.
and then when she runs off after Mrs. Markway has disappeared and the house starts like crumbling around her, that
Yeah.
could just be happening in her mind.
Well, and I liked too that you had two very different male characters, two very different female characters, and they both in 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 both cases they were, sometimes you trusted them, sometimes you didn't, sometimes you liked them, sometimes you didn't. Like they weren't there wasn't sort of the damsel in distress and the savior and the, the obvious sort of bad guy. There wasn't any of those kind of things, I felt like.
No, the only I think the only real villain in the film is the house itself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The house itself is almost a character.
What did you think of Theo as a character?
I thought she was kind of an interesting like opposite to Eleanor. I mean, she's much more worldly, and I think there's kind of there's kind of hints that she might be attracted to Eleanor as well when she like calls her, talks about how they're going to be like sisters and saying my Nell sometimes, and she challenges Eleanor a lot. They have quite a few arguments. And
Yeah,
she definitely adds more diversity to it. Yeah, by having
yeah,
someone who can challenge the main character like that.
yeah. I had read that some consider her a notable lesbian character, which I thought was interesting, and you could kind of see some of those, maybe some of those vibes, but certainly not like shoved in your face by any stretch of the
Oh no,
imagination. But
no, it wasn't explicit at all.
No. And I don't know, it seemed like sometimes she was super judgmental of Eleanor, and other times she seemed very sympathetic, which I thought was interesting.
They did go back and forth a bit, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there was that one scene where apparently she was like trying to get a rise out of Eleanor just to keep her from being frightened about the rising on the wall, but that other scene she just seemed to be like picking a fight with her, really, just
Yeah.
just like you say, judging her. Like when she felt Eleanor was attracted to Dr. Markway and was kind of saying you're making an idiot out of yourself.
Yeah, there was times that you felt like she thought that she was stupid, that she thought Eleanor was stupid.
Yeah.
Which was interesting. And yeah, I don't know. There's just really well-written characters for this kind of a story, I think.
And it is quite a small cast as well, isn't it? There's you get to know all the characters very well. I mean, there's just the four of them until Mrs. Markway appears, and that's only towards the end.
Let's see here. We got a question here. So what do we do? Do we pick the best horror movie we've ever seen? I don't see many horror movies. Here, I'm just gonna tell him here. So we pick these two to talk about.
Yeah. Just because you hadn't seen one and I hadn't seen the other.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, yeah, so what's your next question that you had?
What did you think of the use of cinematography and the environment?
I think that it's key. I mean, there's maybe this is a little bit more production design than the cinematography, but like things like the staircase, I think are just really key in kind of creating atmosphere and tone, and you know, it's just so shaky and so like full of holes and I don't know, there's just something so like insecure and unstable about the whole house.
Yeah. I think like what Dr. Markway says about how all the angles are off.
Yes.
And I think the overall way the house is portrayed, it's like a maze. You can't really get a feel for the overall layout, so you're never quite sure which way anybody goes. As I think it's kind of film that works very well in black and white. That kind of lends itself to that feeling of being lost. And also it's a very detailed environment as well. There's a lot of detail in every room.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that there are like heads everywhere. There'd be like a face somewhere in this little statue of a bride's head. It kind of creates the impression more of the house being alive.
Yeah, there's something about it that just feels kind of I don't know, just sort of weird. It just all feels kind of off.
I mean, Eleanor says when she first arrives, she feels like the house is staring at her, and it really does look that way. You can look at the windows, and the windows are just like completely dark, and you can see them looking like eyes.
Yeah, and I don't know, there's just something about it that just feels like it's all about to like cave in at any second.
Yeah. Yes. And I did like a lot of the camera work as well. There's lots of diverse shots. I mean, there's this in like the explanation scene towards the beginning where you see this woman falling down the stairs. The way the camera is kind of slightly looking down at her, then it kind of almost looms over her.
Yeah.
And then she like goes tumbling down the stairs. And then later on, the camera Eleanor's out on this balcony, and the camera suddenly zooms in on her, and she almost falls over. Then.
Well, it picks its close-ups very carefully. That's one thing I know. A lot of it is wide shots, so you do get the whole room for most of the conversations. Whereas one thing I have noticed in a lot of movies, not just horror movies, but a lot of movies is we've gotten this thing where we love like not just close-ups, but like extreme close-ups where you'll just see like a character's eyes or something like that. Yeah. And I hate that trend so much. I mean, I guess there may be a few directors who can use it well, but for the most part, it drives me crazy. And I did think that if you're gonna have the house be a character in the story, then you want that kind of wider kind of feel.
Yeah. I remember at one point there was an extreme close up of a salmon. I think then they're eating dinner, and there's this big eye in the center of the the screen. It turns out it's a salmon that they're eating. But
Oh yeah.
there are definitely some very good wide shots. Like I think the first time that Eleanor and Theo are together in the bedroom and they hear the noises outside, they're just quite wide shots of the whole room, and they're looking very small together on the bed.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. That's true.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. What's your next question?
Did you find Eleanor to be an engaging character?
I think so. I think she was confusing, which I think actually made her interesting. Like a part of me wanted to just like say like, get it together, woman. You know, like, what is wrong with you? But then the other part was like, I don't know. I found her sympathetic and just different. She was just different than I typically see in movies. Like compared to say even like the typical Hitchcock woman who was typically kind of together and beautiful and she was just more sort of ordinary and unstable, but in unique ways. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Hitchcock women tend to be quite glamorous, don't they? A little bit more like Theo. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But I thought she was a very interesting character. It's just where we kind of get this idea of the life she's had. She spent these 11 years looking after her mother, being very sheltered, not really having a life of her own, and then she goes to live with her sister, who quite clearly doesn't really want her there, and she's just so desperate to belong anywhere. In fact, she tries to belong to this group of people that she's with, and then she feels like she belongs to the house, and towards the end we can she slowly feels herself going and almost being swallowed by the house.
Yeah, I mean, did you think that her like attachment to Dr. Markway came out of nowhere a little bit?
Not really. I mean, I don't think she's had much chance for anybody to be nice to her. And Dr. Markway is a very nice, jovial man. And if, from his point of view, it's completely platonic because he's married. But she maybe felt herself falling in love with him a little bit. Yeah. Did you think that the internal narration that Eleanor has was a little bit weird? It felt a bit like a novel. You don't often see that much in films, but I thought you kind of needed something like that in this film because the way the story was working, you kind of needed to hear Eleanor's thoughts.
Yeah, I think so. I think you needed it. I think that was good. It wasn't overdone. There wasn't too much of it.
No.
It was just kind of just a little bit to kind of help you kind of know sort of where they were going but a lot of it was left, like you said, it was ambiguous as far as do we like these people, do we not like these people? And I think that was and even with Eleanor herself, like it was a little bit ambiguous.
Yeah. I thought she was quite expressive as well, like in these scenes where she's like narrating to herself in her head. Her face gets a lot across as well. Was it? I think it was Julie Harris, you say, who plays Eleanor. She got that across well.
Yeah. Well, you just get this feeling that like, oh gosh, like I'm trying to think of the words. Like she's just very like desperate and you know, just like if you're ever just like you just keep trying to explain things to people, hoping they'll understand, but they're not understanding. I don't know.
No, she is definitely a very vulnerable character.
Yeah, that's a good word for it. Definitely.
Yeah.
Let's see. All right. So, what's your next question?
We've already talked about it a little bit, but did you feel the way the characters played off each other brought something to the film?
Yeah, I think that's the best thing about the movie.
Yeah.
It's just these characters and how, like, untidy they are. They don't fall into typical tropes.
No, they don't
at all.
No. I mean, you have like the scientist and the skeptic, but there is more to them than that. I mean, with Luke, he's not really a grump about his skepticism. He's not like yelling about it. This isn't real. He is quite this casual, jovial character, and there is generally quite a lot of time there is quite a casual approach to how they're going around the house, and they seem to be enjoying themselves quite a bit. And even though there's quite a small cast, they are all very different characters, and so the interactions between them are very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it was enough that you kind of let your guard down a little bit, and then it kind of pounces.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. But Dr. Markway is certainly not what you'd expect from the scientist character, because he actively believes in these supernatural things, and he's really excited about the chance to study it.
mm-hmm.
And even when Eleanor asks him, how did you get into this, he tells a story about how his father wanted him to be a practical man, and he decided to do something that was totally impractical. So, whereas you might expect him to say he had his experience with a ghost when he was younger, and that inspired him to look into it, but he doesn't go with that cliche.
Yeah, well, even to like when his wife appears, and I think I don't know if the remake does this, but in a lesser kind of movie, you would make him kind of he would have been sort of brazen enough that like you would be sort of judging him. But because he hasn't given Eleanor any reason for kind of her feelings, you don't judge him. I don't know. I just thought that was interesting. It didn't fit into typical trope.
No, it is definitely platonic from his point of view. He's just being a nice guy,
right?
With this clearly very vulnerable woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. And yeah, and you can just feel like when his wife gets there that like Theo is the most judgmental of any time in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah,
sure. It does throw a bit of a spanner in the works, his wife turning up.
Yeah. But not in the, I don't know, just not in the typical kind of cheesy way.
No. Yeah.
All right, what's your next question?
Well, that kind of relates to what you're saying about not being typical. The next question would be, do you think that this film takes some unconventional approaches compared to other horror films? We're not sure unconventional is quite the right word, because this is quite an old horror film. But do you think it's like different in many ways from the typical horror film that we generally think of?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean it's not bloody at all. It doesn't. The characters aren't just sort of tropes. They're unique. They're different. They don't fit into sort of classic sort of stereotypes, I don't think, for this kind of a movie. And and it's just not, I don't know, it's just not cheap. And the way the scares are, and the way even the sounds, the sound, sort of the rumbling, and the way that is like it's not like they're like ooh, or something kind of cheesy or whatever. It's a little different.
Yeah. There's like this pounding noise, like they say somebody dropping a cannonball.
Yeah. It's like there's a giant outside or something.
Yeah. And besides that, there's the fact that we never actually see the ghosts, and we never know exactly what they are. Only that apparently the house wants Eleanor to join it. That's the impression that Eleanor gets, at least. And also, you expect to kind of see in horror movies, you usually expect to see kind of evil entity, which is ultimately confronted and often defeated. And I get the impression from the remake where they have from what I've seen of it, they have Hugh Crane appearing as this big scary ghost that possesses the house, and it ends with him being defeated. But there's nothing like that in the original. So it's just, the house is just there as it is, and ultimately consumes Eleanor. You don't know how much of that is really the house is doing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and then there's also sort of the creepy scenes of like when she sees Eleanor sees her name, on the wall, and the movie never really explains that. It's not like there's some. I didn't see this movie, but I heard about this movie called The Boy this year, where they have about this creepy doll, whatever, that this woman's taking care of, and evidently they like explain everything about anything that's scary in the movie, and that's not the case here. They never really talk about it again. There's just sort of this creepy writing on the wall.
No, it just happened, and they talk about it for a while, suggesting that maybe Eleanor wrote it herself, and maybe she did. Maybe she like went into a kind of trance and did that, and they do occasionally like offer like casual explanations of things, like when they find a cold spotter, Luke still says maybe it's just a draft.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We did have a comment in the chat real quick that could you please do a recap of what films you're discussing just during the stream. We're talking about The Haunting, 1963, and The Others. We'll be talking about next. Right now we're talking about The Haunting. But yeah, that cold spot scene was really cool. It just, you could feel that cold, like the way that they sort of that moved their body and the way that they described it. It was
And how
really
pleased
good.
they were about it as well. Markway was like thrilled about it, wasn't he?
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, it's like a validation of his ideas.
Well, and Eleanor's just like excited to have something happen in her life, you know, like and she doesn't even want to leave at the end because
no, she doesn't.
No.
Stay forever.
Because it's like this is better than being with her sister.
Oh, yeah, sister doesn't want her there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she just really has nothing else in life. Which makes her quite a pitiable character, really.
Yeah, I mean, her sister's making her pay rent for sleeping on her couch.
Yeah.
There were a lot of really effective moments and moments that they, like I said, they didn't really even like try to explain. They just kind of were there.
Yeah.
It was
I think like with the with like what happens to Mrs. Markway as well. She kind of talks in there about how she got lost inside the house, I think that's the only real jump scare in Horns, which is where Markway has just got Eleanor off the spiral staircase, and then Mrs. Markway suddenly pops out of a hatch, and he kind of wonder, did she could it have been in the house doing something, or did she just get lost somehow? It seems a little bit unlikely, but it's more likely to have been supernatural, I think. But again, there's that ambiguity to it.
Mm-hmm. I liked that scene very much on the spiral staircase. You could just feel like, oh my, like what is, I don't know. It was just really, I like how it was all sort of full of holes and the way it was kind of, it just worked, I thought.
Yeah, and the camera as well, when it's following Eleanor's feet going upwards, it's like it's sloping. There's like an upward slope from where the camera is.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it.
Yeah.
Okay, well.
Yeah, so that's all my questions. Yeah.
All right, well, I think that's good. I really enjoyed this movie more than I thought. I was expecting something kind of schlocky, you know, and just kind of cheesy, but it was actually really well done. Really good characters, really good dialogue, and yeah. So that's what's the benefit of doing this kind of thing is you get introduced to new films that you wouldn't otherwise watch.
Yeah, because I feel it is technically a horror film, but I just find it kind of fascinating as a film in general. The way
it's like a supernatural horror.
Yeah, I think it's technically called psychological horror.
Psychological, okay, yeah. That's what I mean. That's what I mean. Super psychological, yeah. Well, let's talk about The Others now. Mm-hmm. So The Others is from 2001. It is by this. It was kind of a one-man show, which is really impressive, by this guy named Alejandro Amenabar, and he wrote it, he directed it, and he even did the music, which I think is very impressive. Right. Yeah, and it's about this woman named Grace, played by Nicole Kidman, and she has these two children that are photosensitive, so they can't have any light during the day. So there's these thick curtains all around this house. Well, all of a sudden the servants have all left, and she doesn't have. They've all gone away, and so she hires these 3 new servants, and they start doing kind of strange things. And one of them is a mute, and she starts hearing sort of these noises, and she's getting sort of more and more sort of, I guess, paranoid. And her husband ends up coming back in the middle of the movie, coming back from the war. He had been a soldier, but then he leaves again to go back to the war, and you just see her slowly starting to kind of emotionally become sort of unhinged throughout the course of the movie. And you have these two kids who start doing kind of weird things as well, and they're starting to notice their mother and her weird behavior, and it all just kind of escalates, and until the big kind of, again, this is spoiler filled podcast. So the big twist in the movie is that Grace actually, that Grace and the kids are actually the ghosts, along with the three servants, because Grace actually killed her kids. She smothered them in a fit of mania, and then she killed herself, and it's sort of a fit of grief, and that she believes that God has given her this house as a kind of, it's sort of like it ends up being kind of like a spirit world, kind of in between purgatory, I guess, and earth, and so that's kind of the base sort of story. And what do you think of the others?
Well, like you said with Haunting, I liked it better than I expected. Because like I said, I don't watch that much horror, and but it was quite similar to The Haunting in that there's no real blood or guts or anything like that. I did find, as you said in your video, it has very good atmosphere. I did find there were some pretty creepy and disturbing scenes, like with the when Grace is in that room with all the objects that have been covered with sheets, and just wondering if anything's hiding underneath. I really liked the children as well. I found they were very believable. Like I said, the way they act is it feels quite realistic, and the two child actors were quite convincing.
Yeah, it was not just like your typical creepy child actor, kind of, like a horror movie, the creepy kid kind of thing.
No, and the fact and the way it kind of uses the fact that these characters are a little bit imprisoned, really, and the feelings that that situation generates, and just how with all these strange things going on, Grace is becoming increasingly unstable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because of the photosensitivity and these like thick curtains around everything, like one of the most sort of effective, I think, scenes in the movie is when the curtains are taken down and she like freaks out, what have you done with the curtains? What have you done? Like that is so, like, I don't know, it's just so well done. You're so like engrossed.
When Anne wakes up and in the bed and starts screaming, I was thinking to myself, wait, why is she screaming again? And I remember, oh right, because of the light.
Yeah.
And also the fact that throughout the film, you kind of you think there's maybe different explanations for everything that's going on, like in the scene where Anne is telling, is it Nicholas, the boy?
Yeah, I think so.
When she's saying there's another boy in the room with them, and you never see Anne's mouth when the boy is speaking, so you wonder if maybe she's faking it, and then you wonder if maybe Grace is going crazy, or maybe the servants are trying to make her go crazy, like when she throws away those tablets that she's been given for a migraine, and you wonder if maybe the servants are staging everything so that they can get the house. And I think we'll be talking about the twist later on, but I did like the twist a lot.
And I'm not normally a twist person. No. I normally get really annoyed by twists, but in this case, I felt like it worked very well. It wasn't manipulative. I didn't feel like, I personally didn't see it coming. Other people, claim that they did, but I didn't. I thought that she was grieving, or that it was something with the house, or I don't know. I was surprised that they were dead.
Yeah. I was quite interested. It brought up the subject of post-mortem photography when Grace found that book with all the pictures of dead people in it. That actually was a thing back in the Victorian era.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, people would. A lot of times, people would not have photos of their relatives when they were alive, so they would take them after they were dead, and keep them as mementos.
Yeah, that was interesting. I mean, and just like the way, like you were saying, the way that everything's sort of like covered up, and the way that it uses sort of mirrors and lighting and shadow and just all that stuff, I thought was just, I mean, it's so easy to throw around the word Hitchcockian, but I really feel like this is a close in that field. It is actually worthy of that kind of designation. It's something that I think he would like and that he would make.
Yeah, some of the stylistic elements definitely.
Yeah.
Hmm.
When they go outside and there's sort of all the like fog
Yeah,
and the even like the scenes sort of with the creepy tree and that guy like digging the graves, and I don't know, all that stuff is just so good at creating
yeah,
atmosphere.
yeah, yeah. Typical
And
British weather.
well, and even also Nicole Kidman is very Hitchcockian type of female.
Yeah.
Uh,
She actually played Grace Kelly one time, didn't she?
yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Nobody likes that movie.
Yeah, I didn't see it, but I heard it wasn't good. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, just very like, I think she works though for Grace because she's just very like, there's something about her that seems almost porcelain like, sort of
Yeah.
fragile.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, well, we talked about it a little bit, but actually, I'll just skip. We talked about atmosphere quite a bit. Is there anything else that you noticed about the atmosphere?
We mentioned the fact that the outside is so foggy and gloomy, and that kind of helps the impression of this house being very isolated. Like you never really go outside the house except when Grace goes a little way out and encounters her husband there. They're just like they're kind of in a world of their own. And
Yeah.
then at the end when they're all looking out the window, there's more sunshine again. The things have gone a little bit better,
Mm-hmm.
and there's just darkness and shadows throughout the house that creates this more creepy atmosphere. There's definitely an atmosphere of just uneasiness with the whole situation.
Mm-hmm.
Like with everybody cooped up in all this way, and Grace says at one point it is unbearable. You're kind of waiting for something to crack.
Yeah, and you think it's going to. There's a sense of when the husband comes back, there's a sense of like, there's a sense of relief,
Yeah.
and then like you realize it's not going to last, and then I don't know. That was
But even then, you're uncertain when he just says he's been wandering around for a while. I'm thinking to myself, what's up with that?
right.
And then I was wondering then if he was a ghost. And when we found out that Grace and her children were both ghosts, I kind of realized he must have been a ghost as well. He must have been killed in the war.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, I know. He was. I wasn't sure if if he was a figment of her imagination.
Hmm.
But
But then the children could see him as well, obviously.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. So, what do you think that the movie has to say about faith and religion? Because it was interesting. I read this whole blog post yesterday about how this one woman was claiming that this movie was anti-religion, that it was showing that like her faith was stupid and that it really could like save her in the end, and her sort of beliefs in the afterlife weren't enough to kind of save her or whatever. But I disagree. I feel like this movie is kind of saying, like, especially once you know the twist, like she's in kind of she's in kind of this she's in this sort of in between state because of what she did. And so like it makes sense that she's kind of clinging to her faith to kind of for that sort of redemption, I guess, but she's did a horrible thing, so of course like she's not going to be getting it right away. I don't know, what do you think about that?
Well, I was under the impression it wasn't portraying religion in a particularly favorable light.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's one scene where both the children are kind of questioning what their mother's been teaching and saying, "I don't believe God really created the world in 7 days. I don't believe Noah really got all those animals on that ark, but you can't say things like that in front of Mummy."
That's true.
Yeah, and I think when Grace is talking about her faith, and the Mrs. Mills, the kind of head housekeeper, is saying sometimes there isn't an explanation for everything. And part of the a lot of what Grace is doing is kind of keeping the household kind of just so quite rigid, and her faith is kind of part of that. And then when she at the end she's saying, you kind of wonder if maybe this is the limbo that she's been talking about, when she talks about how children who aren't saved go to limbo. And you wonder if that is this it, or is there some other explanation for that? When Grace says, "I'm not sure there is a limbo."
Yeah, it's true. I love that line about the that we don't know the answer to all of
Hmm.
the questions, because
Yeah.
that's the scariest thing of all. Like, that's the true
Yeah. Yeah.
horror.
Exactly. Yeah.
Even if we do
Not
have faith,
knowing.
the things you don't understand are the scariest
Yeah.
of all.
Yes. Because obviously the existence of ghosts, it greatly challenges what Grace believes, doesn't it?
It's
Yeah.
true. I didn't think it was anti-religion, though. Did you?
Maybe it wasn't really setting out to be anti-religion, but it wasn't really portraying religion especially favorably.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, that's true. I thought it was
Hmm.
just sort of a way of kind of showing, like,
Hmm.
how Grace was, I don't know, was just
Yeah.
sort of racked with grief and guilt
Hmm.
over
Yeah,
kind of,
it happens to be part of her character that she's deeply religious. It's
yeah,
not trying to throw it in your face that religion is bad.
right.
But
Yeah.
ultimately, then the idea of what Grace sees, how Grace interprets the afterlife, with the ideas of limbo and things, that may not be correct, but there could still be a higher power that has created this situation that they're in, where they're kind of still sort of in the real world and yet apart from it.
Yeah, it's sort of a way for her to kind of um, have, I don't know, have retribution or pay. Like, this is sort of her sort of like
Yeah.
Jacob Marley kind of a thing.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, she had to become some kind of eh, epiphany, so some kind
Yeah.
of revelation. Once she's kind of accepted her fate, then the sun comes out, and she and her children are kind of accepting, and they seem happier.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that she will stay in the house for forever? Like, do you think that?
Well, it's possible to say forever, but but you see, they seem contented there.
Yeah.
Once they understand everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe the dad will come back. You're not sure. He's obviously in a pretty bad way. But maybe he didn't realize he was a ghost, and he needed to go through that same kind of epiphany.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. I mean, it kind of leaves, it's somewhat ambiguous as far as but it doesn't really let you know that, like, is this just unique to them and their house, or is this
Yeah, you don't know exactly what the servants went through because they died back. It said on the photograph of them all dead that they died in 1891.
of tuberculosis?
Yeah, and the movie takes place in 1945, just after the war. So they'd had a long time to contemplate their situation, and they're kind of there to help Grace. They wanted to accept it. I've been a few scenes where they talk about how it's difficult to get Grace to understand compared to the children who are more open-minded.
Yeah. Well, and the, like, you go from thinking the intruders are the three servants to, and then you realize, of course, that no, the intruders are these new occupants.
Yeah.
These new homeowners. So that was really good.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, you go on. It's okay.
Okay, yeah. So were you drawn into Grace's story and character?
Well, I was certainly drawn into the overall mystery. I wanted to find out what was going on. I didn't find Grace an especially likable character. She's very highly strung.
Yeah.
And I did kind of wonder things about her. I actually wondered if maybe she'd been making up the whole story about children being photosensitive as some means of establishing control over the household, maybe restricting them in some way. I wondered if she was lying about that, or maybe she'd convinced herself of it somehow. But I did sympathise with her, about her eventual motivations, that she wants to keep her children safe, and she feels like she's being plotted against. So I did sympathise with her by the end.
Well, and Mrs. Mills even challenges her at a certain point, like, says something to the effect of, has he even been exposed to it? Do you know if, like, it's still a problem? And so you think maybe this was just something that was just part of him being a baby or something, and it's not gonna or maybe it is sort of her mania, or I think that's a
Yeah.
good word for it, the mystery of it, of who are these
Yeah.
servants, what are they doing, what
Yeah.
is up with her husband. There's just lots of sort of mysteries.
Yeah. It's quite clear that it all starts when the servants turn up, so you think it must be connected to them in some way. But it's
Yeah,
just not certain how. Hey, and I think he, yeah,
definitely. And I think it does a good job sort of showing her sort of change from at least relatively pulled together at the beginning to, you know, when she gets to that final point where she realizes what she did and has the
Mhm.
and sees the intruders and everything. I think it builds sort of that to a believable point that she would have that realization then.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, also bear in mind as well, Alpha, the fact that she's so highly strung, Jersey was actually occupied by the Nazis during the war. It's one of the Channel
Mm.
Islands in the English Channel, and
Oh, okay.
The British didn't bother to defend them. They didn't feel it was worth it. So the Nazis came and occupied those for the duration of the war. And so I think Grace mentions it quite briefly when she's talking to her husband, but she would have had to deal with all that for the past few years, and so she would be quite high strung from that.
Yeah. Well, and just from you know, losing her, or not even just losing her husband, but like not knowing
Yeah.
about her
No,
husband.
I don't, she doesn't get any message about it. No. Yeah.
And she doesn't. She seems so resentful. This was actually one of my questions: is what do you think about Grace's grief and her interactions with her husband? She's not one of these sort of patriotic war brides.
No, definitely not.
She's
No.
very resentful of her husband for doing this.
No, she
That
says to him,
yeah,
yeah, she says to him, why did you go after this war that had nothing to do with us?
right.
Yeah. Yeah. And he comes back and he's clearly suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, and she kind of struggles to deal with that. I think she just kind of lets him lie around for a while and then just tries to tell him you can't go on, you have to pull yourself together. But that's really the only support that she can give him. I mean, PTSD was I'm not sure it was really a defined thing back then, but she doesn't really know how to deal with it, and she hopes he can just like suddenly one day pick himself up.
Well, and he seems kind of just detached from everything. You know, the
Yeah,
Mrs. Mill says, I don't think he even knows where he is.
yeah, that's right.
And so it's I don't know. It's interesting. It just makes it that mystery. It just builds it up.
Yeah, yeah. The fact that he thinks the war's still going on, he's just completely lost inside his head. I mean,
Yeah.
it's Christopher Eccleston who plays the husband, and he does a really good job. I think he's a very diverse actor, Christopher Eccleston.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yes,
I
he
don't
used
know.
to play he used to play Doctor Who.
Oh, okay, cool,
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, he was everybody's I think really good in this movie, and it just draws you in, and uh, and you feel bad for everybody involved, and then he leaves again, and you're just like, oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
so what? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
there's a bit of hopelessness when he leaves again.
Yeah,
Just think after he said this sort of Grace, maybe things will get a bit better, and then he's just off again. And you think that's really not going to help Grace's mental state, which is already quite fragile at that moment.
yeah. I mean,
He turns up and there's a little bit of hope that maybe things will start to get better,
right,
but no, it's a false hope.
right. That's a good way to describe it. False hope. Yeah, it does. It kind of you feel sort of these highs and these lows throughout the film, and you know, it's both of these movies. One thing I noticed is both these movies are well under 2 hours, so they're both
Yeah,
very tight. I think in the storytelling,
yeah,
where someone like a Shyamalan or something like that would definitely make it like 2.5 hours or something like that. And I think both of these movies would fall apart.
yeah. I
They're
don't think that
stretched.
I wouldn't say there are any unnecessary scenes in these films. They're both very well
Right.
paced.
Yeah,
I was never bored watching any of them.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. Okay. So let's see. Oh, we got a comment from Jeremiah. She says, and the Nostalgia Critic loves The Haunting. That's all I know about it. I may check it out, but same. I'm not a horror person, and by that I mean I haven't seen a single one in all my life. And then we got another. Noki Bufuro says, I love horror movies. Awesome. Well, you should definitely check out these two if you haven't seen them. They're both, I think, excellent. And so, what do you think about the twist?
Well, I really enjoyed the twist. I definitely didn't see it coming. And I have seen the twist itself before. I remember there was a. Have you ever read the Goosebumps books by R.L. Stine?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I used to love those when I was younger. And I think there was at least one. There was this one book where this girl thinks her next door neighbor is a ghost, and eventually she realizes that he's not a ghost, she is. And but I definitely didn't see it coming in this one, and I felt it's a twist that I mean, you say that a lot of times you don't like twists, but this twist kind of serves the story because it makes you want to go back and watch everything again, so that you can watch it from that angle, knowing that, and see where that ties in, the hints that you get.
Yeah, well, it doesn't feel cheap. It doesn't feel like I'm being sort of manipulated. It feels like a natural sort of progression. Like as soon as you realize that's what it is, it's like, oh yeah.
Yeah, and the fact that the other ghosts, that the intruders, you think maybe they're like, even when you find out that the servants are ghosts, you think maybe the intruders are going to be like just hostile spirits, and it turns out that they're real people with their Ouija board. Yeah. Well,
and I guess because they had done a good job kind of presenting Grace as sort of this conflicted character, it's not like I felt like, oh my gosh, they're turning this perfect person into this horrible person.
No.
If that makes sense. So you believed that she could have done that she was that unstable.
Yeah, when they've referred before that Mummy went mad, you can definitely see that. Yeah, she seems right on the edge, even when around the beginning.
Yeah, definitely. And they also, I think, with the music, I don't know, maybe it's just because the director actually wrote the music himself. Like, I don't feel like it's manipulative in that way either. Like, there aren't a lot of sort of bang, or kind of like, it's all just sort of soft and effective, I think, chilling in its own way.
Yeah, I think it fits the surroundings and the era quite well as well. There's a lot of piano, isn't there? I think yeah.
It feels like the movie doesn't judge Grace.
No.
Too much. That.
No.
Yeah.
It wasn't entirely her fault.
Right. Okay, well, I actually only had so let's compare and contrast these two movies. What do you think are like some similarities that they have, and maybe some differences, some key differences?
Well, I think the one similarity is the use of noise. There's a lot of there's a lot of use of noise, like maybe sometimes child's voices or banging around the house that you can't explain, and also the uncertainty of everything. You just don't know. You don't know quite what's there. I mean, even when the children are claiming that there's a family in the house with them, you don't know anything about this family. You don't know if that's the whole explanation.
Right, or if they're the family, or if
yeah. And the fact that there's a bit of mental instability involved in the case of Eleanor in The Haunting and Grace in the others, and you wonder if that plays a part. That's the difference. I think the others has a bit more of a clear plot, and it kind of feels more like there is a mystery that is going to be solved. Where in The Haunting it feels more unsolvable from how they portray it. Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah,
and I think that both of them use the house as like a character in the story, and how things like the staircase in The Haunting, or the I don't know, just the way it uses the walls and the way it uses the rooms and all that stuff to kind of create tone and feel and conflict for the characters, everything like that, and for the others, the way it uses mirrors and reflections and I don't know, just the drapery and the lack of light and just all of that stuff. The house kind of becomes sort of this character in the story.
And the doors as well. I mean, in The Haunting, there's talk about how the doors will slam shut on you because they're made off center, and then in the others, there's this rule about how you must shut the door you came in through before you open the next one.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It just feels sort of closed and austere and all of that.
Yeah, it's a world unto itself in both films.
Yeah, and I would say that both films have I don't know, they both draw you in, and neither of them seem sort of cheap. Neither of them seem none of them settle for sort of the cheap scare. They always kind of work a little harder.
Yeah, because I think the only jump scares in the others are like possibly like right at the beginning where we suddenly cut to Grace screaming in bed, and then right at the end when the children are in the wardrobe and the old blind woman suddenly opens it up.
Yeah, the only real jump scare in The Haunting is, I think, in the on the platform when Grace is like, you know.
Yeah.
That's.
But no, the others felt slightly more conventional simply because it had more of a clear plot. But you're right, both films they definitely put a lot of effort into it. They don't just go for the cheap options.
Yeah, and I would say, I guess the difference is, in my eyes, is just I think that the Haunting, has a little bit more. I mean, because there are more characters. You know, you have. Well, I mean, they're more sort of characters with I say the dialogue is stronger in The Haunting.
Yeah. Yeah, because the others is mainly like Grace and the two children. The dad when he's around for a little bit, and then out of the three servants is really Mrs. Mills who has the biggest role. The other two are just kind of more background characters. It's
really a one-woman show in a way for for Nicole Kidman, and she's really good in it, I think.
Yeah, she does play off the other characters a little bit, but she does more stuff on her own than you see in The Haunting.
I think The Haunting has a little bit more humor too. With the Russ Hamlin character and some of the other scenes like a little bit lighter.
Yeah, there are some more light-hearted scenes in the Haunting, or at least towards light-hearted. I don't think there's really anything like that in the others.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, these are both excellent movies. I highly recommend that anybody who watches this, you go check them out. The others, The Haunting, I think you'll really, really like them. And so we will talk and kind of come up with our next His Pick, Her Pick. If you have any genres that you'd like us to cover, then let us know in the comments section. And we will try to do it next month, but we'll see. The holidays are always a little bit tricky, but we'll do our best. And thanks so much for doing this with me. I think this was really fun.
Yeah, it's fine. I enjoyed it.
I appreciate
doing something new other than the podcasts.
Right. Yeah. Well, so how can people reach you?
Hey, well, my Twitter is PNE Richard, and I also have a blog where I talk about books and films and various other things, which is velociraptor256.wordpress.com.
Right. And we will be podcasting together again next Saturday, where we will be talking about my favorite Harry Potter movie, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1. Just kidding.
That was sarcastic.
And so that'll be fun to talk about that. So you guys want to check that out. And thanks again. I really appreciate it. There we go.